Well, thanks for inviting me, Josh. Okay, I'm ready for that. No, I think I'll just let you guide me, and once we get started, we can even go back and forth a little bit, unless there's a reason to distinguish. I'll mention when I'm going back and forth. I'll mention which book I'm referring to. How's that? Yeah, it's actually a card game, so it's a little more portable than a board game. So it's 250 cards with self-disclosure questions on them that you can ask your friends or the person you're just getting to know on a date, or take it home for Thanksgiving vacation to your family. I've done it. Yeah. Yes, and so let me take this in two parts. First of all, the way we're defining honesty here, Josh and I are defining honesty, is the kind of honesty that favors relating versus controlling. So I'm going to give a little mini lecture here. Do you even know the difference, those of us who are listening out there, the difference between communicating to relate versus communicating to control? And there's a place for both, but relating means you speak your truth in this moment, what you're feeling, what's going on in your body, what stories or imaginings are playing in your mind, or what worries even are playing in your mind. You speak these things for the purpose of revealing yourself and being known by the other. So in relating, you aren't trying to control the outcome. So let's go over to what controlling means. Controlling is what most of us do when we're trying to make a good impression, or maybe you think somebody might be upset with you if you say something, so you don't say it at all. That's controlling. So it's when your communication, when your self-expression is determined by kind of an over concern of how the listener is going to take it. So you modify your communication, and then that's not as honest. If you say, I'm afraid to say this to you, so I'm going to sugarcoat it, well, then that's one level closer to honesty. And there's some places where controlling is fine and important, like if you're a parent and you want to impress upon your child to look both ways before crossing the street. Those are, times when control is absolutely necessary. So I just wanted to kind of give us a definition of the way we're using this particular brand of honesty is the type that just is talking about you. So honesty, the way we're talking about it, is not going to the person who you work with and saying, you got to start pulling your weight around here. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to the person who you work with and saying, you got to start pulling your weight around here, but it isn't about yourself. So the idea of getting real is if you say, there's something I have to talk to you about. So I'm kind of role playing now, you and your coworker who you think is doing all the easy stuff and leaving all the hard stuff for you. I talk to a lot of people in business where they feel like they're not getting a fair deal with regard to some people being more lazy. So you would say, when you asked me to do that thing for you, I said to myself, I think I'm busier than he is. Why is he asking me? And so that would be an example of relating versus controlling. You reveal what's going on inside of you. You might even say, and it kind of pissed me off, or it kind of hurt my feelings, or it kind of gave me the impression that you're trying to get away with something around here. And I just want to clear the air and let you know I'm feeling that. And now I want to hear how you feel. Because relating is two-way. It's not just I dump my stuff out on people. It's I say it, but I watch to see if they've received it, how they've received it. So it doesn't mean I don't care about the outcome. It means I'm not controlled by my fear of the outcome. In other words, I still care about the person. I still care if he's going to go away now and not ever want to talk to me again. And I might say that, gee, I'm worried that you might not want to talk to me now. I want to find out how you feel about the feedback I gave you. So that's relating. That's honesty. That's just sort of everyday honesty. And then I want to come to the second part of your question, Josh, about, well, aren't we supposed to try to get what we want? And my answer is yes, absolutely. Make outrageous demands about things that you want, but own it. Like, I want you to do something for me if I'm going to do this for you. If I go back to this workplace example, or I want to have sex tonight. How about you? Now we're not talking to your coworker here. I'm giving you a different context. Or you're on a date and you say, I want you to pay the bill, and then I'll pay the next one. So wants of any sort are positive. They're a positive thing if you own that they're your wants. The so in that sense, you're asking for what you want, but you're not worried about exactly how you say it. So here's where the outcome bit confuses people, and I think just the question, well, aren't we supposed to try to get what we want? Yes, but do it in an open way. So you're telling the person what you're feeling and what you're wanting versus some kind of, I did this for you, so now it's your turn to do that for me. That's not an open, transparent thing. That's a kind of indirect way of asking for what you want. So then I've had people do this with me. It's a girlfriend of mine. She says, uh, I'll give you a massage, and you'll give me a free therapy session. And I go, wait a minute here. How did I get into this? I mean, she didn't ask me if I wanted to do the deal. She just was laying that on me. And of course, I can be honest back and say, hey, wait a minute here, let's slow this down. I don't think I ever agreed to this deal that you're proposing. So could you say that to me as a request, and then I'll tell you if I want to do it or not. That would have been a good outcome to that conversation. But what we're talking about when we're talking about honesty that relates versus the kind of communication that's pretty unconscious, that just perhaps avoids taking risks, like avoids the risk of coming right out and saying, I'd like to have sex tonight. How about you? I mean, that's just a straight out request. But people who beat around the bush and say, well, you're probably not, I see you're tired, so you're probably not interested in being with me tonight. That would be extremely indirect way of talking about wanting sex. But people do that. They make up the answer to their own question, which is a form of controlling. So I'll stop there, Josh, and see where we want to go next. Yeah. That's another typical way that people kind of use a control. I call them control patterns. I put quotes around the word control pattern. It's a term that means you kind of mess with your honest way of expressing something, like, no, just a little bit. No, so you're minimizing your wants as a way of managing your own anxiety. Here's my interpretation, okay? As a way of managing your own anxiety about what? So let me ask you, what could you have been managing anxiety about? Like being an imposition on him, or what? Mm-hmm. So if you had it to do over again, Josh, because this is the one of the little techniques I teach is revising. That's one of the true skills in the book Getting Real. If you could go out and come in again and redo that request, I guess it's to the wife, what would you say? Okay, and how does that feel as you say that? Yeah, oh, pretty please, could I just have a little sip of water? And we can, we can be open hearted and tender toward that part of you that may have been shy at that point. Because I just want to say, there's a whole lot of new rules about how much we're going to interact with our friends' dishware, using our friend's bathroom. I'm having meetings outside with people, but they're, kind of shy about asking to use my bathroom because it's inside. And there's a lot of new rules. So that's a very good one to bring up into this call right now, Josh. I think for other people, it's, there might be a tendency to be a little less relaxed about asking for things that used to be easy, like water or using a friend's bathroom or going into a friend's house. Because I know from in my community, we're having a lot of outdoor gatherings, but we're not doing anything indoors with our friends. Sebastopol, California, just north of San Francisco. Mhm. Mm. So I'm not getting what do you feel better about saying? Which is the better version of you there? Good. Yeah. That's what that would be my answer too. So I'm not going to pronounce things right or wrong, but I would prefer hearing that from a friend. I'd prefer a question. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, the basic idea is when you're under your parents' care, you are dependent on them for your very survival. And you do, maybe we don't realize it, but little kids are quite sensitive to what is okay and not okay with the parents. Of course, there's the regular things that get rewarded and the things that get punished, but then we're also watching for cues about, oh, daddy, daddy likes things that have to do with sports, and he doesn't like things that have to do with music or art. Okay, I won't share that part of myself with him. And these are sad little rules that kids make up that limit their potential, but they are normal. Okay, so and we're very worried about upsetting the big people. Okay, and this is across the board. Children are dependent for many years on their parents, so they get used to shaping their behavior, including their expression of their wants and needs, based on what they think the big people can handle. All right, so you grow up kind of with a conditioned self. That's what psychologists call it. They call this your conditioning. These are all the little rules you learn to survive. But now you're out on your own. You're making your own money. Maybe you even have your own house. You do not have to be, you're not really dependent on your survival for anybody. But we've got those old conditioned patterns still inside of us, limiting a lot of what our expression is. And one of the biggest things that we are afraid of, and it's just naturally human to be afraid of this, is afraid of some kind of emotional pain, and especially the kinds of emotional pain that mirror a type of neglect or abuse or emotional pain that you had as a child. So if you were the kid who didn't get listened to as a kid, you're still going to be kind of self-conscious about whether, are people really listening to me? Do they really want it? I'm in a group. Do they really want to hear what I have to say, or should I talk real fast so I don't waste anybody's time? Patterns like that. And so what we want to do is begin to notice the ways that we speak and act in those patterned ways, like that example I just gave you about trying to say it fast and get off stage. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of ways that we habitually, like not asking for what you want directly is huge. It's a huge pattern. And if somebody now gets upset with you, let's say you do ask for water in the wrong way at your friend's house and they get upset with you, they say, oh, we're not giving our glassware out to guests. I asked you to bring your own water bottle and you didn't do that. So, you're not getting any water. So let's say they get upset with you. It's not the same as when you're little. There's no huge consequences, except, and this is where we've got to be compassionate to ourselves, except the fact that I still have those sensitivities that I had when I was a child. They may not make any sense anymore because I make plenty of money and I have my own house and nobody can threaten my survival. But now, as we get older, we get triggered if we see evidence that somebody is moving away from us in some way, or disapproving of us, or reacting toward us in a way that was painful when we were young. So that is called an emotional trigger. And that's what the whole book, 5-Minute Relationship Repair, which is the second book you mentioned, by Susan Campbell and John Gray. That book is all about when my emotional triggers get set off by perhaps a unexpected or shocking reaction, a hurtful reaction from someone else. Do I make myself wrong for feeling like a 2-year-old? And do I say, well, you should be grown up now? No, we have to honestly realize that the 10-year-old that people didn't listen to back in childhood, that 10-year-old is still inside of me. And that part of me deserves compassion and tenderness when I get my feelings hurt. So the real job of growing up is being able to reparent yourself every time you get your feelings hurt, or you get scared by somebody who got angry at you, or you get scared before you even get the question out of your mouth, but you're still all worked up inside with one of those emotional triggers of, oh, I know I'm going to be rejected. Look, she's not even looking at me right now. And I was going to propose marriage, whatever it is, you're, very sensitive still as an adult to a lot of the same things that you were sensitive to as a child. But now, because we're big, we get to be better witnesses of it. We can notice, oh, I'm triggered. We can actually say those words to ourselves. We can actually pause and be tender toward that hurting part. Because what gets triggered is an old fear. It's usually some sort of disconnection from somebody who's important to us. So the people who can trigger us are not the clerk, not usually not the clerk at the post office. It's more likely to be your significant other or your friend or your kid or your parents. And I'm talking about adult people getting triggered now. And we do need to just become more mindful of the fact that these quick emotional, like pain reactions, are going to happen. And doesn't mean there's anything wrong with anybody, but it does mean that this is an opportunity for us to get really real at a deeper level so that we get to know what are those core fears, like fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear of being misunderstood. See, I have a list of about 12 things that I call the favorite fears. And almost everybody has more than half of those favorite fears. And they're like the ones that I just mentioned. Oh, by the way, that list of fears would be in the book 5 Minute Repair, 5 Minute Relationship Repair. So if they want to, people who are listening want to inventory your fears, because if you kind of get to know and accept your fears, you won't be thrown off quite so badly when you do get triggered or somebody says something hurtful or shocking. Yeah, yeah, and I always recommend people pause a little bit when you have that emotional reaction. I mean, sometimes you're at work, so you might have to go take a bathroom break, but or it's just not feasible. You're not feeling safe enough. But at some point, go back to that moment of feeling shocked or hurt, and feel with yourself, just like a compassionate, good mother, just like the ideal mother would take care of you and your feelings. So you wouldn't tell the person to, you wouldn't tell yourself, your hurting self, to, grow up and, you know, get out of my hair here, I'm busy. You would embrace this child. So we have to become good parents to the inner child in ourself that's still needing some time to grow up and some loving care. Hmm. Yes, you can still do the work without reconnecting with any childhood memories. To me, there's always inner work to do. I'll explain that in a minute, but life is about continuing to get to know and accept yourself better and better. And then, of course, getting able to express yourself better and better. Better meaning in a way that helps you get your needs met, be a creative, contributing person, and feel good about yourself. So, as you go through life, the way that most people connect with that unfinished childhood business, even if they don't have a memory about it, the way they connect with that is through their adult triggers. So somebody in a relationship that's a significant one says something that I take as rejection, or I take as them moving away from me, or not liking me, or criticizing, or trying to control. So these are all part of on the list of the favorite fears here. I call them the favorite fears. And I have a favorite fears contest when I speak to audiences, and I say, well, how many people have a fear of abandonment? Okay, almost everybody raises their hand. How many people have fear of being misunderstood? Most everybody. And then when I say fear of being controlled, not maybe only half the people have fear of being controlled. And then fear of being ignored or invisible, that would be about half the people too. So, but you'll see in a group of any size that people nowadays are at least aware enough, self-aware enough, that they can raise their hand in a room full of strangers admitting to these kinds of fears. So that level of self-awareness is a good beginning to being able to realize, okay, then when I get triggered, when I get that sort of fight, flight, freeze, or I blank out, deer in the headlights, don't know what to do, or I get instinctively defensive or aggressive, or start to want to wrest the conversational ball away from somebody, when all of those sort of emotionally reactive things happen, that means I'm triggered. That means there's one of these core fears that's activated, which actually means that there's probably some core need, like the need to feel valued or significant or respected. Those are core needs for children to have met as they're growing up. So it means that some core fear got activated, connected to some core need that wasn't met. So I just kind of take that for granted. And whenever I get triggered, I pause and do some conscious breathing to quiet my nervous system down and make space enough. And here's where I'm going to give you the technique for self-healing. This is in the book 5-Minute Relationship Repair. Once I've got my nervous system to a fairly calm place, I begin to bring the feeling back of, wow, I felt like I got punched in the gut there by what that person said to me. And now I stay with that body sensation, or I stay with the more emotional hurt type feeling in my heart. And I put my attention on that. And I continue to breathe to make more space for these feelings to be there. So it's, in a sense, I'm saying to myself, it's okay to have these feelings. And by consciously breathing and voluntarily letting yourself have these feelings, you're activating your witness, your inner observer. And it can be a compassionate witness if you train it this way. If you just train yourself to go, oh, honey, yeah, there's hurt there. And it's like you're talking to yourself. Or you might you might not have to use any words. Just put your hand on your heart or your belly or wherever it feels nurturing. And you just continue to breathe and be with, because that's what a hurting child needed from their mother or their whatever the parent was, but they needed a certain kind of nurturing that we call holding space. And that's a common word now in personal growth and spiritual growth circles. Holding space for the hurting part of you. And that's exactly what psychologists have always said a child needs from a mother is a good enough holding environment. That's the language that psychologists have used since the 50s, at least. But how many parents offer a good enough holding environment? Because they're distracted by so many of their own problems. They're busy, they're trying to make a living, they got more kids than just you, maybe. Um, so parents are going to fall down on the job. But each one of us inside has this good mother archetype or this capacity for self-compassion. It's in there somewhere, no matter how bad your actual parent was. So here's where there's something that's just deep inside the human, and I'm just going to call it the good mother archetype. And if you pause and breathe and feel that hurt with some awareness surrounding it, some breath and witnessing surrounding the hurt feeling, you begin to reparent yourself. Sometimes an early memory, as you continue to be with yourself, an early memory will pop up, and you might even shed some tears, or you might even feel some of the pain that you did not allow yourself to feel when you were small, because it would have been too intense for your nervous system. Or maybe there was no support there, because if you really just cried for like an hour inconsolably, it would have made your parent too upset, too anxious. So we protect our parents and like we shut down our feelings. But now it's just you and you being with this feeling, and you let yourself cry for 10 minutes. Usually people don't cry for much more than that, but they sometimes do need to move some energy that's been blocked for their whole life around certain painful things. So sometimes the tears will come without a memory. Sometimes there's no tears. I mean, that's not necessary. And as I say, sometimes there's no memory, but there's just a deep feeling that this is familiar, that this feeling of somehow not being important, or my voice, I speak my voice, but I'm giving you just certain examples. There's a lot of other types of insecurities, but this is such a common one. I speak and it doesn't seem to do any good. It's like I was talking to a brick wall. And so these kinds of memories will kind of come back, but it's not necessary for healing. The part that's necessary for healing is being willing to feel a little bit of that emotional pain that you probably clamped down on when you were a kid. But don't feel that pain without being able to give yourself some support through breathing and through conscious, compassionate witnessing. So that's something we can all learn. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times when we start attempting to bring some consciousness to a hurting part of ourself, like, oh, let's say it's the fear of abandonment, so it makes you very clingy in your relationships, and that's exactly what pushes people away. You're so clingy, and you're always nervous and, you know, afraid to let the other person out of your sight or whatever. So you become um, a person who the other person then starts to push away. And so you say to yourself, well, how can I love this tender, this part that Susan Campbell says is a tender, beloved part of myself, my fear of abandonment, and that little kid who also was kind of clingy because I could never seem to get, I never could seem to get dad's attention no matter what I did. He seemed to be more interested in his own interests. So, I was, doing hoops to get his attention. It never worked, but that's that going after something and continuing to come up empty-handed. Well, I've had this all my life. I'm supposed to, and I don't like that part of myself. It's the kind of little person in me that drives people away. So yeah, you're gonna have to confront the self-critic there. And all I can say is this happens in layers. The coming to compassion comes in layers, and most of the time people have a certain amount of self-rejection if there's pain in there. And we don't even like to admit that we get triggered, because that makes us feel somehow less than, we should, I've had a lot of therapy, I've done a lot of groups, and I still get triggered. People say that kind of thing. So there's a lot of self-shaming inner statements. The only thing I can suggest is you breathe, you really breathe, and you feel the feelings that you're having while you're saying those things to yourself. And again, it starts, all of a sudden you begin to have a dual awareness. You've got the critic and you've got the tender part that's receiving this criticism. And you hold space. You can't activate compassion because that's absent right now. All you're activating is, I've got this criticizer and the criticizee, and I'm able to see this. And so you just witness that for a while each time it comes up. And generally speaking, if you can keep witnessing and then letting yourself identify a little bit and give a voice. I mean, if I do therapy work with somebody, I would give a voice to the inner critic, and I would give a voice to the part of the person that feels wounded and hurt by the lack of support from the inner critic. So the critic might say, this is the part of, you're the part of me that has, everybody rejecting me. How am I supposed to accept you? And then you get to go to the other part and you say, well, this really hurts to hear that. Even from you don't accept me. And you just do like a dialogue. And for people who don't go to therapy, if you're at all a writer, if you can write these things out, it's like a journal exercise. Dialoguing between the different parts of yourself is a very good journaling exercise. You give each part a voice, and pretty soon the witness gets stronger and stronger. The witness is the one who then reads all this stuff. You've been writing furiously with your different voices, and then you step back and you look at all this. And the more you're developing the witness, the more you're going to be eventually developing the part of you that can hold space for the multitude of parts within yourself. And through that process, it's a strange way that you learn to become a parent. It's like you're giving birth, or you have given birth to all these different parts of yourself, and you're getting to know them. It takes a while to get to know all the parts. And then somewhere along the line, some version of acceptance. There might be acceptance with a certain grief or sadness around what you see, but there's still an acceptance. It's sort of like if you were born with one leg shorter than the other. There's nothing you can do about that. That's part of you. I mean, I guess you can get prosthetic devices, but it's always with you, and you begin to see those different parts of yourself as these are just things that happened, And this is the way I was wired up based on my early life experiences. So it's sort of like, being born with one leg shorter. I've got a certain degree of handicap here because of how I was programmed as a child. And there's a little bit of grief there. And grief is kind of akin to compassion, only in the sense that it's a softness, and it's an accepting kind of an attitude. So it's almost like the more of yourself you can see, that develops the witness, and eventually some kind of greater perspective grows, which may or may not lead to compassion. But most people have a good mother archetype, a compassionate inner, uh, let's call it compassionate witness inside of you. You have that potential, so you just have to kind of take your time getting there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what I want to say is you'll never be the perfect parent. And that's hard for a lot of parents. You're going to make mistakes. Your kids are going to have some handicaps based on your own lack of development as a human, because you didn't wait until you were 75 years old to have kids. I mean, sometimes we do eventually grow up, Josh, but it takes a lot longer than 30 years. You know, most people try to have their kids, in their 30s, 30s and 40s, yeah, you're not going to be grown up enough to do the job. So nature gives you something that kind of forces you to grow up a little bit more, which is being a parent. Um, yeah, I'm with you, Josh. The best thing is to talk honestly to your parents. I mean, to your kids when you're a parent. Talk honestly to your kids about what you do and don't know. Ask for their feedback. I mean, these are the things that parents don't do because they're trying too hard to be perfect. Tell your kids that you're not sure, but you think that them having a car when they're 16 might not be the best idea because of whatever. I'm just making up cases here, but whatever you feel, you raise it depending on the age of the kid, of course. But you just try to be an interactive parent rather than an over dominant, over controlling parent. That's the worst thing. The worst kids come out from parents who, well, two extremes: completely neglected or completely over controlled. But I'll tell you, the neglected ones come out a little better than the over controlled ones. So if you got real high control needs and needs for perfectionism and you're a parent, you might want to, uh, I don't know, get some help or at least go to a parenting class. And it's okay. Your kids are gonna need to read the self-help books. They're gonna need to know about triggers because certain things you have to be out of your parents' house as a growing person. You just cannot successfully deal with some of these issues until you're on your own. So you're gonna have to let your kids deal with some of the scars and wounds after they're out of the house. Yes. Hope this gets to be a bestseller on your podcast series. How honest you are with yourself there, Josh. I'm really touched by what you just shared. I hope everybody will make their own list like this. The things, the kind of the unspoken rules that you learned growing up in your family of origin. Mhm. Yeah, and once you've gotten the value on doing inner work is really about knowing what's down there, like that, making that list, knowing what's going on inside of you, knowing your shadow parts, which are things like shame that we don't want to show to the world. Um, what if people made know thyself as the highest value rather than being the most popular person? I mean, a lot of our values are programmed into us. And I think the authenticity work that I'm doing and uh, our mutual friend Dynamo is doing, and a lot of us, it's to try to redefine what a good human being is, because the rules that we've made up about what a good human being is are honestly they're wrong. Oh, I mean, to not show weakness is supposed to be a good human being. To never change your mind. I mean, of course, that's kind of old school, but that's still around. To be firm in your convictions and have firm beliefs. Well, most beliefs are bullshit anyway. You should question your beliefs and not hang tightly onto them and be proud of them. Some beliefs are necessary to get through life. Like I have a belief that in a in an intimate relationship, honesty is the best policy. Now, with irrational authorities that might be out there trying to put you in jail or something, honesty isn't always the best policy. But in an intimate relationship, so I mean, I'm just telling you what one of my beliefs are. But back to this idea of redefining the good human being. So I want people to try on the idea: what if self knowledge and being more authentically myself, because these are things I actually can control. What if my self esteem and worthiness was based on this instead of some external criteria? Yeah, yeah. So this is it's really, there's this famous book by Joseph Campbell called The Hero's Journey. It's actually called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, but it's about the human journey. And of course, his is more of a spiritual and archetypal, which means sort of the essential human dilemmas. So that hero's journey idea really is about just becoming your authentic self. That's a Joseph Campbell's no relationship to me, but he's a great man and deserves to be studied. The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's about mythology, but it's also the journey of every human, and it kind of helps you redefine what a good human being is. I gotta go, but I've spent a lot on the whole compassionate self inquiry and that whole thing about self rejection. That's all in the book 5 Minute Relationship Repair. So I honestly don't have more than another couple minutes here for today. But I want to say I'm writing a new book that's going to be even more useful to deal with the questions that you posed to me. It's really a book on. It won't be out until 2021 though, but I want people to look for it, and it's called "I'm Triggered." But it's really about how to use daily life as an inner awareness practice, so that everything that life throws to you, I show you how to pause, get calm, and go inside and inquire and get to know yourself through the things that happen to you in your daily life, particularly those things that are painful or that you resist, of which there are plenty, as we all know. So that I'd love to come on with you again when my next book comes out, because this stuff is even more hands-on. There's going to be more guidance in how to do your own work, how to be your own therapist. Yeah, people should subscribe to my newsletter. Yeah, if you come to susancampbell.com, right in the center of the homepage, it says something about get a surefire way to build confidence, because I send out a free ebook about building self confidence in some of the ways that I've talked about, like becoming more resilient in the face of emotional pain. That's sort of my bottom line teaching here. So go to susancampbell.com, and it says click to enroll on the page, but that's really click to subscribe to my newsletter. And in that newsletter, I announce a free teleclass, like a little seminar, 1 hour seminar. Every month, I give us a free seminar on Tuesday afternoons. East Coast time, it would be um, more like 7 o'clock East Coast time, and it's 4 p.m. Pacific time on a Tuesday. So, um, anybody who is enjoying this podcast can be in touch with me over time, and in my newsletter, we'll tell you about various events that I'm doing. Plus, I always add some tips and tools, very practical stuff, in a lead article. So there's always like a educational article and then announcements. Well, thanks for doing this. I think it's a great service you're doing. So I look forward to our next conversation, Josh. Thank you.